Good afternoon, everyone. We are so happy to see you at today's edition of Black Health Trust. We trust that you have had a good day and the rest of the day will be enjoyable and that you chose to spend these few minutes with us. Today, we're going to talk about something that's not a new subject, but never can be talked too much about. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to the Black Health Trust. Thank you very much, Dr. Barbara Neighbor-Stevens and other co-moderators. So we do want to speak about racism as a public health crisis. And it's a talk given a few months back by Reverend Dr. Roger Mitchell, who's an MD, he's a pathologist, who's a former uh, medical examiner for the city of Washington, D.C. He is the president-elect of the National Medical Association, and he was recently appointed as the president of Howard University. So he's got a big job in front of him, and he's one of the world's experts in death in custody, gunshot wounds, and racism. But before that, I do have on a sad basis to report that one of our long time members of our audience at the Black Health Trust and one of my personal friends for over 55 years, Mr. John Sudukas, who is a major producer and one of the two founders of the Newport Jazz Festival, the Cool Jazz Festival, passed on Friday. His wife called me this morning, and he caught the flu, and he was 91 years old and wasn't able to survive. So my hat's off to him and to his family. But also, like Ivan Walks, I went to church today, probably like Dr. Neighbor Stevens did. And there's a dramatization that they put on the crucifixion and the rising of Christ. And I encourage people to go to YouTube and look up Greater Zion Church Family. It was a really uh, inspiring drama by Bishop Michael Fisher that I encourage you to listen. And lastly, before we get to the rebroadcast, Simon, can you show the picture of what I'm proud of today and what I'm so happy about? So that's my young granddaughter. She's 4 months old, and I'm showing her to you and getting a pediatric visit from Dr. Barbara Neighbor-Stevens as well. So with that, Simon, can you play Dr. Roger Mitchell and Racism is a Public Health Crisis? Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Uh, we have a growing membership today, and the title of our overall subject today is Racism is a Public Health Crisis. And we have a number of individuals joining us. As you know, our plan and mission is to provide credible information in this time of hazard where your spirit is being challenged, your bodies are being challenged, your mentality is being challenged. We have the chief medical examiner, that's pathologist for the city of Washington, D.C., who is also a consultant to the George Floyd case and many other cases, and an author of many articles and textbooks on police brutality. We also are joined by Dr. Ron K. Bailey, chairman of the board of the Cobb Institute, former president of the National Medical Association, and noted psychiatrist. We also have
My friend, former Admiral David Brewer of the U.S. Navy, who will address certain topics of current interest. And we know that there have been a lot of things happening over the past few weeks, namely that the businesses of the country are being encouraged to open. And you're going to be asked, if you're not already out there, to go back to work. And there are some decisions you're going to have to make. Now, let's simply say that they should start with common sense. This virus is still out there. It's still real. But the community and businesses are opening up. So that means that you have to use common sense and protect yourself. It's still important to wear a mask and for people around you to wear a mask. And I, for one, won't be around somebody at my job that does not wear a mask, because that protects me. And I have to go home and be with my family, my wife and my children, so I need to be protected. So you're showing me consideration when you wear a mask. In my job, I wear gloves because I have patients. There are surfaces that may be infected, even though we continuously spray and clean and disinfect. I still don't want to take the chance. And we know that hard surfaces, metallic surfaces, glass surfaces, plastic surfaces can harbor this virus for quite a few hours and even up to several days. So those are very important. When you go back to work, you also need to have the strongest immunity that you can have. That starts with good rest, a good 8 to 10 hour sleep if you can do it. It means that you eat well, including micronutrients, minerals, green leafy vegetables, and I say not humorously, but I take prenatal vitamins, which have all the micronutrients in it: iron, selenium, the B vitamins. I also take vitamin D, 50,000 units once a week. I take vitamin C, 2,000 milligrams per day. And I wake up, and even though I don't like Listerine, I gargle with it, because I know some of the receptor sites for the coronavirus are in my oral pharynx, in the back of my throat. And I remove that from my mouth, and I do drink water. And I stay well hydrated. And part of the reason I drink the water, it will flush any remaining viruses into my stomach, which has one normal hydrochloric acid, which is deadly. I constantly wash my hands for at least 20 seconds with soap and water, which is the best disinfectant for this virus. And soap, the kind that makes suds, does destroy the covering of the virus. So it's very important. I do use hand sanitizer, but I really depend on soap and water. And then I use hand sanitizer. Anybody coming into my home or my office must first be sprayed the hands with at least 60 to 70% alcohol, or you may have another solution, but in my office we use alcohol. And they spray my hands, my iPhone, my briefcase. They ask me questions. Have I had any direct contact with anybody who is COVID positive or had COVID exposure? And they put a thermometer in my ear and make sure I don't have a temperature. That's at my office. At home, it's not very different either. I'm screaming. They make me take off my shoes at home. I don't do that in the office. And I leave them at the door. And most times I'm made to go to a shower. Some people say that you're king of your castle. I'm not the king here. But you want your family protected. And when you go to work, those same procedures should be followed as closely as you can. We also know that many of us expect that there will be a second wave of this coronavirus, because some believe that it might be able to hide itself in certain organs, but we may expect another round of infection to come back in a few months. So just in case, since this is about protecting your family, you may want to make sure you maintain durable supply of food, dried foods, frozen foods, etc., for several weeks in case you need it, in case there's a run on valuable supplies at the stores. I'm not suggesting that you hoard, but you should be well supplied for the number of people in your house. Bottled water, other drinks, and food. And we suggest that you eat as healthy as possible. We also have advised people to decrease the amount of sugar in your diet, as it has an effect on your immune system as well. And we do know that elevated blood sugars, insulin resistance is bad for you. The same with obesity. When you're obese, there are more than 50 vasoactive and other hormones, such as tumor necrosis factor, et cetera, that are elevated, angiotensin 2, just by being obese. So being obese is not the jolly fat person. So we need to get that weight down. Somebody said, well, should I lose 40 pounds? Just start with 10. Something that you can do. Your blood pressure should be controlled. There was some concern earlier that Blacks have more high blood pressure, 4 to 5 times the normal or the rest of the country, high blood pressure. And some of this is because of abnormal ACE2 sites. ACE2 sites are where angiotensin 1 is converted to angiotensin 2. And we are recommending that if you have a patient or if you are taking drugs that act on that system, such as ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blocking agents, that you continue to take those. But speak with your physician about that advisability. I'm leaving my patients on, because I want to make sure that they don't have strokes or other things. And I don't believe there's an up or down regulation by those medications, but be sure to check with your personal physician. We also, as a part of this call, after having surveyed many members of this call, that we're going to try to provide not only credible information on a weekly basis, and hopefully we'll have that digital as we interpret the healthcare effects of this virus. And even beyond that, we're also putting together a group of vetted, very credible, board certified expert panel of physicians across the country who can provide you with consultations on a second opinion, or in many cases on a first opinion for a very affordable price. And my theme today personally is that I am, in fact, my brother's keeper, sisters too. And that's why we want to have this information available. And I'd like to start off by reading, one of my mentors wrote a letter to the editor, Dr. Richard Williams. And Dr. Williams wrote this letter to the editor of the New York Times. I'm going to read some of it and paraphrase it before I introduce our first speaker. So he says, I am writing to you about the George Floyd tragedy, specifically about how he died. He says, I'm a Black cardiologist, professor of medicine at UCLA School of Medicine, and he has a unique perspective on the anatomical and physiological basis and aspect of this egregious killing of a Black man. We know that Mr. Floyd essentially
Dr. Maxey, you got to unmute yourself. You just muted yourself. There you go.
Good. Okay. Mr. Floyd died on Memorial Day. And he died after having a heavy pressure applied to his neck until he lost consciousness. And he subsequently died. The medical examiner stated that there was no evidence of strangulation on autopsy, and that underlying conditions and the potential of intoxicants could have been the cause of that death. Now, we know that that's misdirection. I think that most cardiologists, and I'm going to add almost any doctor, would agree that heavy pressure applied to the neck could stimulate a vascular structure in the arteries of the neck called the sinus, carotid sinus, which can cause the heart to slow and ultimately stop. In other words, that person can flatline or have a cardiac arrest. This can be fatal unless resuscitative efforts are applied to counteract that. There are no after effects of this that would be evident on an autopsy. So they could have gotten away with this. Masters of martial arts know that applying this pressure to an opponent's carotid sinus results in unconsciousness. Now, unquote, I knew this from watching wrestling, as they do it on TV. Everybody knows the sleeper hold, and what these cops are applying is the sleeper hold. So we know that Mr. Floyd was constrained, he was handcuffed, and this was followed by the pressure on the neck. We know that there are numerous precedents to this. Eric Garner, the Black man in New York who had a chokehold. In fact, Dr. Williams noted that there were 16 cases in Los Angeles in the 1980s. And the police chief contacted him to comment on this in a press conference. Dr. Williams, to his credit, knew that this physiological phenomenon was the cause, and he spoke on it. And the reason I'm reading this, by having this type of knowledge and making it available in public, we cannot be misled. We know that that coroner there in Minnesota, the DA in Minnesota, they have ways to deflect the guilt. Our guests today are going to unravel some of that information. The first guest that I'm going to ask to speak is Dr. Roger Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell is the Chief Medical Examiner of Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. He is also a consultant, I believe, for the George Floyd case in Minnesota, and many other noteworthy news stories that you've heard about unarmed Blacks dying at the hands of police. He has written many book chapters. I've spoken to him briefly over the past few days. And Dr. Mitchell, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you fine. We'd love to have you comment as you would. And as they say in the Black church, have your way. And I understand that you have an obligation, so I'm going to remove any constraints you have on time. I'd like you to speak on the issues of not only George Floyd, but on your job as a medical and forensic examiner. And take your time, Pastor.
Well, thank you, Dr. Maxey. It's just such a privilege to be with you, and the fact that you're communicating with community and convening this every Sunday. I feel a certain way that I wasn't asked before that, but we'll talk about that later. As you stated, I'm the chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C. I'm the 12th chief medical examiner here in the District of Columbia since 1971. Before that, from 1871 to 1971, we were a coroner system. The difference between a coroner and a medical examiner is that a coroner is an elected official. You may have a coroner in your in your jurisdiction, in your city, in your county, particularly if you live in somewhere like Louisiana, or if you live in Ohio or California. They're mixed coroner systems. Medical examiners are physicians. I'm a forensic pathologist, so I did my med school and my 4 years of residency and 4 years, 2 years of fellowship. And so now I'm the chief here after being the chief in New Jersey for a couple years. I've been the chief in the district for about 6 years. My whole career has been spent looking at deaths in custody. I remember when Amadou Diallo, if anybody on the phone, on the Zoom is from New York City, he was a young man who was shot at 41 times, hit 19. He had entrance wounds in the soles of his feet, meaning that he was on his back when he got shot. He was reaching for his wallet when he got shot. I was a first-year medical student, his same age, 23 years old. That changed my life forever. So I was to be a forensic pathologist, and those people got off. Those cops got off, by the way. Shot at him 41 times, hit him 19, unarmed black man. And so since then, I've been working on getting written a position paper on how deaths in custody should be handled by medical examiners and forensic pathologists. So 2 years ago, we got that published. I'm the lead author of, and that should be available. You can look it up, Deaths in Custody. It's the NAME, National Association of Medical Examiners position paper. I can make that available to Dr. Maxey for whatever listserv he sends this out to. And that tells a medical examiner or coroner the steps that they have to do to make sure that they perform the proper autopsy. And then it gives some guidance as to cause and manner. One of the big things that it does is it makes a recommendation that we should no longer be relying upon law enforcement to report their own deaths in custody. Right now, all deaths in custody are reported by law enforcement. And so they report it through the FBI. And quite frankly, it's underreported. How many deaths are at the hands of law enforcement? How many deaths are also that happen in our prison, in our jail system? These deaths are underreported. And so what we're asking for is a box on the U.S. standard death certificate so that physicians who are certifying the death, by the way, my job, you have doctors who write prescriptions on prescription pads. My job is to establish cause and manner of death. And so that's my prescription pad is the death certificate. And there are different categories, different lines on a death certificate. What we're asking for is that deaths in custody put as a checkbox on the U.S. standard death certificate so that physicians are the ones that are checking this box, and that information can be made available to our public health system, because we know that the killing of our people is a public health issue, whether it's secondary to hypertension or diabetes, or whether it's secondary to street violence or law enforcement force. All of it is a public health issue, and we need to be able to capture it. I wanted to give that as a general introduction, because there's always questions about what we should be doing and what we should be asking for as it relates to policy. And that's one concrete way where we can get to some knowledge, some additional knowledge about this issue. So let's shift to George Floyd. Let me be clear. And again, I've been practicing forensic pathology not a long time, since 2006, 2005. So about 15 years I've been practicing forensic pathology. And let me be clear, the manner of death, there's 5 manners of death you can choose from: homicide, suicide, accident, natural, undetermined. Those are the 5 that any medical examiner and coroner can choose from. This case is a homicide, period. There is no confusion. The confusion that was created is the reason why we're having this discussion right now. The suggestion that this was not an asphyxial death, I disagree with. I know the medical examiner in Minneapolis. I know him well. I've spoken to him several times since this has all come out. And I've expressed to him as well that I disagree with his conclusion that this is not asphyxia. He added neck compression. He said cardiopulmonary arrest due to the subdural restraint and neck compression of law enforcement. That was his cause of death. On his report, there was no manner of death, but his manner of death is presumed to be homicide. If I were to certify George Floyd's death, I would say asphyxia due to neck compression. Period. Very easy, straightforward for anyone to understand, including a jury. And this is important because any doubt that's created within this autopsy report has the potential to translate into the jury. And why do I say that? Well, because the questions will be, well, Dr. So-and-so, are you saying that a general healthy individual, an individual that was 24 years old, that did not have high blood pressure, did not have fentanyl on board, did not have sickle cell trait, and that same knee was placed on that individual's neck, would he have lived through that? And by suggesting that the underlying causes of death, the underlying disease that George Floyd had any bearing on the fact of whether or not he could withstand that restraint is absurd. No one on this Zoom call could have withstood the level of pressure that law enforcement officer had on the neck of George Floyd. So to me, it's like a hanging. And so those of you that are clear on our history, hangings that are state sponsored historically have been called lynchings. And so the same type of pressure that collapses the carotid arteries, which you need anywhere from 5 to 23 pounds of pressure to collapse the carotid arteries to ensure that the brain does not get blood flow. That compression, anyone that had that level of compression would have died. And so it's like a gunshot wound. So even if I had a gunshot victim that was that had high blood pressure and may have had some drugs on board, may be an obese, may have had a big heart at autopsy, that none of that has a bearing on the gunshot wound, if that makes sense. I see a couple nods. I'm a Baptist preacher, so if you don't nod at me, I'm gonna think that I got to go longer and talk a little louder. But what I'm saying to you is that don't be confused. This is indeed a homicide. And so let's talk a little bit about COVID-19. I think we need to mute our phones if we're not on mute. Let's talk a little bit about COVID-19. As the chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C., we've handled all of the COVID-related deaths in the District of Columbia. So we've made sure that we've gone out to all of the hospitals that are in our jurisdiction to make sure that we brought those loved ones in because we wanted to make sure that the funeral homes got handled appropriately, and the families got handled appropriately. And we understand that hospitals don't necessarily do a great job at fatality management. They do a better job at saving people's lives. And so what we did was from the beginning, since March 20th, which was the first COVID-related death that we had in the District of Columbia, which I performed the autopsy on. Since then, we've had about 590 COVID-related deaths in the District of Columbia. 480 of them were district residents. 80% of them are African, well, 75% of them are African American. The majority of individuals, 97% of them are over the age of 50. 7% of them are over the age of 80. So these are our moms, these are our aunties, these are our pops, our grandmoms that are dying from the COVID-related disease. And so you've probably been on Zoom calls, and Dr. Maxey has said much to you about this connection between equity and disparity and healthcare access to COVID outcomes. And I'll just reiterate that. The reality of it is that when I was in medical school, and I don't know about Dr. Maxey, but when I was in medical school, they would say being Black was a risk factor. And I'm here to tell you that being Black is not a risk factor for COVID-19. Let me just say that again. Being Black is not a risk factor for COVID-19. Institutional racism is a risk factor of COVID-19. So there's genetic changes that has happened through the stress and increased catecholamines, and we can get into the science of telomere length and what puts us at risk in epigenomics and how that translates. We can talk about there's clarity surrounding the ACE receptors that Dr. Maxey has talked about, and that is absolutely true. But our environmental exposure to what leads to disparities and lack of equity to our outcomes that ultimately lead to us dying at higher rates from high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, cancer is not our melanin. It is not our melanin. It is the fact that we've been disenfranchised and kept away from access and continue to be kept away from access surrounding education, economics, housing, healthcare, and criminal justice. So we are in a pivotal moment right now in our country where we can call out racism, be educated about racism, be clear about its effects on every sphere. W.E.B. Du Bois laid out those 5: education, economics, housing, healthcare, and criminal justice. And he knew it then at the turn of the century that we know now, that without equity in these areas, there are poor outcomes across the board. And so we have a great opportunity right now to be able to speak truth to power, but also build action platforms to engage in a way that we don't lose this moment. And I say we, right? Because there's going to be, every single one of us has a talent on this call. Every single one of us has a talent. Every single one of us has been called to do something. Every single one of you are sitting home and saying, I wish I could do more. And what I'm saying is if and I tell you, here's my Baptist preacher coming. If God has told you to do something and you're not doing it, that's the thing you need to be doing. If you have been scared to step out on a business that you've been, and you said, I'm too old to do that business, that's a lie. Someone has told you that you were too young to start going back to school, that's a lie. All of the lies that we've been told and have told you've told yourself, this is an opportunity now for us to engage differently. I'll say this, we need to put pressure on our policymakers. We need to vote. We need to establish structures. I'm in government. I don't know how long I'm gonna be in government talking so reckless, but I'm in government. And so we all have a position to play. But what I want to encourage us is that there may not be anyone coming. there may not be anyone riding in on a pale white horse to save us. And so this is an opportunity for us to be able to do the work of the work, right? And MLK said he doesn't have a problem with necessarily this concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But he said there's some of us that don't even have boots. And I quote that because there's work that we need to do on our own, and there's work that we need to do collectively in order to make the change. I'm going to leave it there. I think I have a little bit of time for some questions if anybody has any questions, but I wanted to clarify the cause and manner of death for George Floyd for this community that Dr. Maxey has spoken to, and understand that there is direct relationship between the disparity and equity that we're seeing in health, as well as the disparity and equities that we see in police use of force within our communities, that's directly related to institutional racism. So thank you, Dr. Maxey, for giving me this time to have this brief conversation.
Thank you so much. That was very appropriate, even though it was a rerun. I'm very proud of Dr. Mitchell, who now is running the entirety of Howard University and has been elected as our president coming into the new year of the National Medical Association. What do you think, Dr. Neighbor-Stevens?
Well, I had quite a few thoughts. The first thought that came across my mind was there was nothing that was said then that's not true now. And there have been all kinds of efforts to circumvent some of the points that he made, but we still at the same point, and truth survives. I was thinking about the time when that tape was made, what we were feeling, and what we were feeling then, I think we're feeling on steroids now. And the remedy is, as he said, we can't just wait for somebody on a pale horse to come riding up. Every single one of us have something we can do to help correct the situation that we find ourselves in today.
So what I get out of that is that we know that we have to keep ourselves mentally and physically strong. We have to keep our families safe. We have to be self-sufficient. We can't use self-destructive, ultra-processed foods. We need to be, I read something today that examined the diets and all the blue zones of the earth. Those blue zones are places where people tend to, a higher percentage of them live to be 100. That includes certain areas in Greece, Okinawa, an area in Los Angeles where the Seventh-day Adventists live, in another city called Georgia, or a country in Russia. But they all eat at least 1 cup of beans per day as a source of protein. Isn't that something? Thousands of good things. Beans. Beans are a good source of protein. They have plant-based diets. And we want to eat green leafy vegetables, but beans seem to be a major source of food in people who live long. We know that we don't have backing from our current government, and we have to survive. And this government is now even talking about putting out people who are convicted of criminality out of the country, even if they're U.S. citizens. I wonder if that applies to people who've been convicted out of 32 or 36 felonies in New York, if they get put out too. I don't know about that. Well, this is Easter Sunday, and I want everybody to be able to have time to enjoy their families. I don't know if we have any comments or questions, Dr. Neighbor-Stevens or Simon, in the chat.
No, there's nothing in the chat.
Well, let's have some final comments for both you and me. You first.
Well, as we gear up and charge up our batteries of faith and strength and triumph, especially on this day. Let us look around us to see what battles we can affect. They're different. It's not just one expression. I would say there's one source, but there's not one expression of how things are being done to dismantle longstanding institutions. I was so saddened this week to hear that Head Start is being eradicated. And there are all kinds of studies that show the benefit of that program. Food programs in all the communities that require federal funding are being impacted. There are going to be a whole lot of hungry people, a whole lot of hungry children. There is an opportunity everywhere you look. I encourage you to take the opportunity and join the fight.
I thank you, Dr. Stevens, and as my closing comments, everything that we said in this video, even though it was a few years back, is true now and should be considered. Continue to take your medication, continue to seek good medical advice of someone that you trust and that cares about you. Take your appropriate medication, be strong, eat correctly, and love your family, and stay with us. Have a great Sunday. Happy Resurrection Sunday to everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.